farming is considered not only a job, but a way of life. For many, it's a legacy with skills and land passed down through generations, built on long hours and strong commitment to care for the land and the animals that live on it. Livestock isn't just a commodity to most farmers. It represents hard work, independence, and a steady source of income. Many farmers consider these animals as part of the family, and their well-being is a direct reflection of the farmer's labor and care. Farms are not only workplaces though, they're also homes. They are often remote, isolated, and dependent on nature's rhythms, where a single event, whether it's a failed crop or a predator attack, can disrupt that balance and threaten a family's livelihood. So you can only imagine the distress caused by waking up to find several of your animals had been hunted and killed. It would be anxiety-inducing, stressful, and infuriating. That's why so many measures are put in place to keep predators from crossing into farm boundaries. But imagine finding that on top of all this, the way the animals were killed made little to no sense. No signs of struggle, no obvious predator, and most disturbingly, not a single drop of blood inside an otherwise untouched carcass. My name is Luke Mordew, and this urban legend is the Chupacabra. It was in the summer of 2008 that something strange washed up on the shores of Ditch Plains Beach, near the town of Montauk, New York. It was a carcass, although nobody who saw it could identify what creature this could possibly be. It had leathery pink-grey skin stretched over a tight, bloated body. It had strange fingers and stiff curled paws. Its snout was beak-like, and where eyes should have been, there were deep, sunken hollows. Jenna Hewitt was the first to take a photograph of the mysterious, haunting creature. She had gone to the beach with friends when she had come across the unusual carcass, half buried in the sand. Instantly, she noticed that there was something different about it. It seemed to be part mammal, part bird, like some sort of mythological creature, which is why she gave it the name of the Montauk Monster. In an instant, the story was blasted across the internet, bringing with it a slew of speculation. Some theorized that it was an experiment that had escaped from the nearby Plum Island Animal Disease Center that sat just a few miles offshore. Others thought that it could have been a mutant of some kind, or even a failed scientific experiment. No matter what it was something strange and unusual, sparking the imagination of all who saw its picture. Soon enough, wildlife experts studied the picture of the Montauk Monster and concluded that it was not a hoax and was very much a real creature. However, it was also nothing unnatural. It was, in fact, a raccoon that had bloated from decomposition. Over its time in the water, its facial features had been distorted by a vicious blend of corrosive seawater and the scavenger animals that dwelled beneath its surface. Many accepted this explanation, but, as is always the case, some refuted it, believing it to be another case of scientists covering up for their government overlords, allowing it to firmly squat amongst the many conspiracies that continue to spread around the world. Regardless of the belief, though, the story of the Montauk Monster remains. As often is the case, regardless of what the scientific outcomes are, the tales of mysterious creatures roaming our lands endure. Although, just how big the legend grows and how far it spreads is impossible to predict. In my telling of an encounter with the Chupacabra, we will follow Carlos and Dominic, two men enjoying their time together on a hot, sticky night in Puerto Rico. The stars seemed brighter than usual that night, sparkling around the crescent moon that hovered above the sugarcane fields ahead. The calls of the many insects filled the air with a chorus of summer sounds as Dominic cracked open another ice-cold bottle of beer. He had come to visit his cousin Carlos for the weekend, and after a long day of helping out on his farm, they were now enjoying some good food and beers whilst reminiscing over old times on the porch. Carlos reached out and clicked his bottle against Dominic's before both sat back and swigged, although Dominic had seemingly been a tad too overzealous with it, causing the froth to shoot up the funnel and out of the top. He pulled his body forward, shoving the bottle in his mouth, whilst Carlos laughed, scooping up a handful of peanuts as he watched his cousin struggle through the laughter. The commotion they had caused had seemingly disturbed Carlos's livestock, with the goats who were resting in the pen around the corner now bleating and calling into the night. Carlos sighed as he slumped back into his chair, waiting for them to settle down. But strangely, they seemed to only get worse, now sounding somewhat panicked as the sounds of their scuffling hooves darted from corner to corner. Carlos called for them to settle down, but if anything, the bleating only got worse. "What's going on there?" Dominic asked as he carefully swigged his beer once again before getting to his feet. "I'm gonna go check if they're alright," he explained as he stepped off the porch, making his way around the house. Carlos sat back and watched him with a smile on his face, both proud of his hands-on approach and appreciative that someone was there to help. Dominic arrived at the pen, listening to their scuffling feet inside. The goats' bleating had gotten so loud that they had likely begun to wake up several neighbors. The pen wasn't doing anything to keep the sound at bay, being nothing but a frame of metal over a firm fence draped in a thick plastic sheet to stop any intruders getting inside. He unhooked the gate's lock and gently pulled it open, reaching for the torch beside it. He flicked it on, only startling the goats further as they continued to swarm from one side of the enclosure to the other, as if avoiding something. He slowly panned the torch around the room, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was causing them such distress. Earlier that night, Carlos had told him stories of them panicking over a frog that had somehow gotten inside, so no alarm bells were going off just yet. Not until he noticed a dark, shadowy figure sharply dart across the room, disappearing behind several wooden boxes in the far corner, as if hiding from his light. Whatever it was moving significantly faster than a goat. "What are you doing?" Carlos's voice bellowed from behind, causing Dominic to jump so hard he almost lifted off the ground. This amused Carlos a great deal, who cackled loudly whilst lifting the shotgun in his hands, a torch gripped beside it. "What do we have?" he asked, now with a sudden serious tone, as if he hadn't just scared the living daylights out of Dominic. "There's something in here," he replied, pointing the torchlight to the boxes once again. "I saw it over there." He stepped closer, squinting his eyes as he attempted to focus on them, hoping to reveal what was behind it. But as he made his way around, it became clear that whatever it was had now gone. "Shit!" Carlos hissed from behind with a frustrated sigh. Dominic turned to see that he was studying a large tear in the plastic sheet, as if something had chewed its way inside. By now, the bleating of the goats had settled, with the animals feeling comforted by their presence, although anxiety still firmly hung in the air. "Well, it's gone now," Carlos exclaimed, lowering his gun once again as he turned to face back into the room, lifting his torch to study the goats. "You all right?" he asked in a playful manner as several made their way towards him for affection, although Dominic couldn't relax just yet. He only saw a glimmer of whatever the creature was as it darted across the room, but he saw enough to know that whatever it was not something that he recognized. "I'll go make sure it's not lurking outside," Carlos proclaimed in a far more casual manner than before, beginning to make his way to the gate. But before he could finish his journey, something on the floor caught his eye. With genuine distress, he paced deeper into the enclosure, swearing heavily under his breath as he dropped to his knees. The goats had parted to get closer to him, revealing that the creature had managed to get at least one of their animals before the men arrived. Lying on the muddy earth was the still carcass of a goat, its body still warm from the recent attack. Carlos snarled under his breath as he studied it. Dominic edged closer, watching them under the torchlight. It was strange. The goat had no obvious bite wounds, no signs of distress, and not a speck of blood on its white fur. That was until Carlos lifted its head to reveal 3 strange hole punctures on its neck in the shape of an inverted triangle. Dominic instantly jumped back as Carlos shot up to his feet, stepping away from the goat and gripping the gun tightly in his hand once again. Both knew what this meant. This was no coyote or rabid dog. This was something far worse. Before they could say a word to each other, the air filled with the sound of a large thud, followed by the sharp call of a cow outside. Without thinking, Carlos shot for the gate and flung it open, charging outside with his shotgun ready, causing the goats to frantically pace around the room once again. Dominic quickly followed, struggling to keep the goats inside as he slammed the gate shut behind him. To his right, he could see Carlos standing by the tall sugarcane field ahead, his shotgun up, armed and ready, pointing up towards the house. Dominic slowly edged closer to Carlos to get a better look, his eyes darting between the object ahead and Carlos's trembling fingers that clung to the trigger of the gun. On the ground, lit under the pale crescent moon and many stars above, a cow lay on the ground motionless. Dominic would have assumed it was dead if it was not for the occasional jolt it let out. It wasn't until he arrived by Carlos that he realized that the jolting was coinciding with the horrifying sound of a slurp and suck, as if something was in the middle of draining it of its blood. Carlos, now filled with adrenaline, let out a sudden call to get its attention, startling Dominic in the process, causing his eyes to dart around the area as fast as he could to ensure that nothing else was creeping up on them. By the time he focused back on the cow, the sucking had stopped, and the large spines of a creature's back had begun to raise out from behind it as it slowly began to crawl upon the carcass of its newest victim. It revealed itself to be a strange, dog-like creature, with its bones protruding high out of its spine like a row of spikes. Its teeth were sharp and small, apart from 3 long fangs. 2 above, one below, like a mutated vampire canine hybrid. Its skin looked black in the moonlight, completely devoid of hair, almost reptilian in appearance. Its eyes, that slowly moved from Carlos to Dominic, shimmered with a tint of red whenever it caught the light, creating the haunting visual of a devilish creature. Dominic wasn't sure what to do, but luckily for him, Carlos did, as he instantly squeezed the trigger, shooting at but missing the beast. This did nothing to spook the strange entity, as instead it released an aggressive snarl before lunging forward, breaking into a charge the moment it hit the ground. "Run!" Carlos screamed, instantly giving up on the chance to shoot again as he turned to escape. Dominic did the same, darting back towards the goat's enclosure. It was impossible to outrun the beast. They knew this, but what else could they possibly do except hope? Unfortunately for Carlos, he was the one the beast had fixated on, instantly diving onto his back and knocking him to the ground, causing the shotgun to stumble away from him. By the time Dominic had realized and turned to face them, he could already see his cousin's panicked face disappear into the sugarcane. Without thinking, Dominic charged forward and scooped up the gun. He had little to no experience shooting one, and with his cousin so obstructed by the tall sugarcane and darkness, it would be foolish to try. And so instead, he threw himself into the greenery and forced the handle of the gun down as hard as he could, colliding with the beast's cold skin. It snarled with rage, but did not let Carlos go until Dominic flung the gun down a second time, perfectly colliding with the top of the creature's skull. Finally, with an otherworldly, horrifying screech, the beast let go and fled into the sugarcane, disappearing into the night. Shortly after, it was as if the beast had never come, bar the wounds and carcasses left behind. The goats were once again calm in their enclosure, and the air once again filled with the many chirps of summer bugs. Dominic and Carlos, just like before, sat on the porch. Although now, Carlos gripped the shotgun in his hand, ready to fight off the beast if it was to return. They had cleaned up his leg, although not much damage had been made, bar the same punctures they had come to recognize. They would take it in turns waiting on that porch until the sun came up, before cautiously continuing their work the following day. The next night, they'd do the same, only to repeat it again the night after that. Soon enough, Dominic had to go home, and so he did. They would share the story with any who would listen, although rarely would they meet someone who believed it. Over time, it became more of a scary story shared amongst friends, although every night that Dominic would go home, he would remain vigilant, always waiting and ready for the day the Chupacabra returned. The Chupacabra is an extremely young cryptid when compared to others in its category. But even so, it has managed to solidify itself in third place as one of the most commonly known cryptids worldwide, up there with the giants such as the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. It has been embraced across Latin America and the southwestern United States as a distinctive cultural symbol. Its image can be found on merchandise ranging from t-shirts to coffee mugs in several souvenir shops in the area. It has even been incorporated into traditional art forms, such as the colorful alebrije sculptures of fantastical creatures by artists in Oaxaca, Mexico. This emphasizes just how solid the legend has become to certain corners of society, now woven into the fabric of several cultures. To those who don't speak the language, Chupacabra is a name that sounds mysterious and ominous. But to Spanish speakers, it's very literal. Chupa means to suck, and cabra means goat. The name was actually coined in 1995 by Puerto Rican comedian and radio host Silverio Perez in response to a wave of livestock killings that were making headlines at the time. He introduced the word on air as a joke, but even with its playful undertones, it stuck, quickly becoming the official name of the creature. Interestingly, it was originally used in the plural form, chupacabras. That version is still used in much of Latin America, while English language media eventually regularized it as the chupacabra. Either way, the name gave this strange new legend an identity, helping it travel further and faster than most folkloric creatures ever managed to do. Its physical descriptions vary from place to place. In Puerto Rico and other parts of South America, it is described as an upright, bipedal creature that resembles a large, reptilian-like kangaroo with huge glowing red eyes. In this iteration, it is also said to be the size of a small bear, carrying a row of spines on its back that reach from the back of its neck down to its tail. However, as the legend continued to spread, the descriptions underwent significant changes. Eventually, notably amongst mainland North America, the creature was being described as a smaller, quadrupedal creature that was very canine-looking, apart from the fact that it was completely hairless. It was described here as having a pronounced backbone, sometimes covered in sharp spines. It is commonly said to walk on 4 legs, although, in some accounts, it is said to be able to walk on 2. Its skin is described as being lizard-like here too, hairless and scaly, sometimes even greenish in color. Here, it is consistently described as being the size of an average dog, with glowing red eyes and prominent, sharp fangs. This description started to appear across the border of the US in the early 2000s, stemming from reports out of the Yucatan Peninsula in northern Mexico, and very quickly, this bipedal canine-like version of the creature became its official look to most of the world. However, there are other iterations out there too. Sometimes, the eyes are described as a more down-to-earth pitch black, rather than the more mystical red glow. It is described as having a hunchback alongside its long spines. Its skin isn't always said to be scaly either, with some describing it as being covered in quills. Its height can vary from 3 feet tall to 5 feet tall, and in some iterations, it is even said to have large, bat-like wings rising from its back. Compared to many cryptids found around the world, the Chupacabra legend exhibits a relatively clear point of origin compared to most, with the first major documented report emerging in Puerto Rico in 1995, when a woman by the name of Madeline Tolentino claimed to have seen a strange creature lurking near her home. According to her story, the creature stood on 2 legs and had dark, reptilian skin with a series of spines running down its back. Its eyes were large and slanted, glowing an intense red, and it moved in a way that she described as unnatural and mechanical. This initial sighting quickly grabbed the attention of the public, and before long, tales of this strange, mysterious creature were spreading across several continents. However, whilst this 1995 encounter is considered to be the formal beginnings of the legend as we know it today, similar stories had been shared as far back as the 1970s. It was in 1975 that a series of livestock killings plagued the small town of Mocha in Puerto Rico. At the time, these killings were attributed to a creature known as El Vampiro de Mocha, which translates to the Vampire of Mocha. Early reports suggest that satanic cults were first thought to be to blame for the slaughters, although this idea faded away when killings began to spread across the island. It was in 1987 that the legend began to truly take shape, when Puerto Rican newspapers El Vocero and El Nuevo Dia published several reports of mysterious animal deaths that had occurred. Although it was not just the killings that had drawn the journalists in, it was the fact that amongst many of the slaughtered animals, they were said to be completely drained of their blood. In 1995, Puerto Rican farmers once again began mass reporting the killing of various livestock in Carnarvon, with victims often being said to be left with puncture wounds on their necks, like that of a vampire. According to their reports at the time, there were no signs of distress or attacks on any part of the carcasses apart from those neck wounds, and whilst the holes remained open, there was no blood found at the scene on any of them. Victims were vast, with the bodies of ducks, rabbits, chickens, pigs, and most notably, goats being found attacked in strange and mysterious ways. It was now, during this new panic and mass reporting, that the creature was finally given the name it is now known as across the world: Chupacabra. It wasn't long before stories of the Chupacabra began to spread, and before long, similar killings were being reported in Mexico, Brazil, Chile, and the southern states of the USA. People had grown so afraid of the tales that some had begun to even put precautions in place, hiring people to guard their livestock when they had to leave. Whether the Chupacabra was real or not, something was most definitely killing livestock, and that needed to be protected. Although the fear went beyond this. There are also reports of children being escorted to school in the morning in case the creature was to appear. In fact, some were said to have left their homes entirely, too afraid to be around where such a devilish creature roamed. This may seem an overreaction on hindsight, but it's worth pointing out that it needed to be taken seriously when you remember that by April 1996, over 2,000 animals had reportedly fallen victim to the fangs of El Chupacabras. Before long, most of South America knew of the potential threat that was roaming the darkness of the night. But the stories didn't entirely come through gossip and hearsay, as in October 1995, Mayor Jose Ramon Quimo Soto of Conavanas, who was trying to get re-elected the following year, began to make grand gestures in an attempt to seemingly alleviate the anxieties of the locals by making a spectacle of it all. He organized 200 individuals, including armed police officers, creating a task force of sorts, with the intention of capturing the creature. If this wasn't grand enough, there were more theatrics to come, as he was also seen to be dragging around a goat in a cage whilst carrying a large crucifix. As expected, this led to a lot of attention nationally and internationally, and soon enough, he was being featured in the Washington Post and the New York Times. The Puerto Rican government, understandably, had a very different approach. It was clear to them that the stories of a dangerous monster roaming the island weren't going to be great for tourism, and so they brought in several biologists with the intention of providing a scientific explanation for the attacks. However, it was already too late for this, as many conspiracies, theories, and scary stories had begun to spread. At the time, the US military maintained several active bases across Puerto Rico, and one of them, Ramey Air Force Base, was less than an hour's drive from Canovanas, the location of the earliest Chupacabra sightings. And this did not go unnoticed by those investigating the creature, with many already feeling an unease with the presence of a foreign military operating on the island. This became a key focal point of their suspicions. Rumors began to swirl that the creature wasn't folkloric at all, but the result of a biological experiment gone wrong. An engineered entity that had escaped containment and was now roaming the countryside under the cover of night. Some even claimed that it was part of a classified weapons program designed for surveillance or combat. They speculated that someone may have accidentally, or perhaps even deliberately, released it onto the island. Some theories went a different route entirely, with the Chupacabra's reptilian look that had been reported by earlier accounts leading some to believe that it was likely an extraterrestrial being. UFO sightings had been reported in Puerto Rico for years prior, particularly in the El Yunque rainforest and along the coast. With stories of cattle mutilations and strange lights in the sky already part of the local lore, some claimed the Chupacabra had arrived as a passenger above a visiting craft. A few even went as far as to say it was a kind of alien pet that had accidentally been left behind. El Yunque, the dense rainforest in eastern Puerto Rico, has long been tied to strange phenomena. Some associate it with UFO sightings and mysterious lights in the sky, but some go even deeper than that, claiming that the forest hides government secrets, underground facilities, or even interdimensional portals. Although, on the other side of belief, some religious groups saw it from more of a spiritual angle, with some claiming that it was a demonic entity, perhaps even the devil itself. Its attacks on animals, its eerie, unexplainable presence, and the sheer fear it inspired were all seen as signs of something far darker at work. No matter what it was to the people who shared its tale, the Chupacabra has been quickly solidified into public consciousness. A creature born out of fear and fed by media attention. It had been molded by culture, shaped by conspiracy, and finally let loose onto the world. Spanish language media played a huge role in fueling the panic that came during the Chupacabra's early years, particularly across Latin America and Hispanic communities in the United States. Talk shows like Christina and news programs such as Prima Impacto regularly featured sensational segments dedicated to the creature, often with dramatic music, reenactments, and frightened witnesses recounting their encounters. In many ways, they acted as both amplifier and architect, transforming scattered local stories into a full-blown international phenomenon, and embedding the creature firmly into public consciousness. To most, the Chupacabra is a tongue-in-cheek story shared as a dark mascot of Puerto Rico's culture. But to some, the mystery remains. There are still those who claim to have witnessed it, with some even reporting that they had caught or killed one. That being said, after all this, you would think something, anything compelling would have arisen by now if there were any truth to the tale. It is when something cannot be tracked, and yet still never truly disappears, that we must consider whether it's perhaps the questions we are asking that needs to change. If you're still listening, I know you share my passion for folklore and urban legends. But to keep these stories coming, I need your help. For just £3 a month, you can ensure the show thrives, with shorter breaks between seasons and even more content created. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll unlock exclusive perks, including access to our bonus series, Modern Myths, giving you 8 additional episodes each season, featuring captivating tales such as The Hodag, The Dark Watchers, and many more. You'll also enjoy behind-the-scenes insights, discounts on merchandise, and access to our private community chat, where you can connect directly with me and other urban legend enthusiasts. And as an extra thank you, I randomly feature patrons in upcoming stories, so you could become part of the legends we discuss. Your support isn't just subscribing, it's joining a passionate community dedicated to keeping folklore alive. Your contribution directly fuels the research and production of this show. If you're ready to join, just click the Patreon link in our show notes to subscribe, and I'll see you there. But for now, back to the legend. It wasn't long before stories of the Chupacabra began to spread beyond Latin America, now reaching the southwestern United States, rewarding it with international recognition. This was largely due to the coverage found on TV, only being pushed further as the arrival of the internet coincided with much of its timeline. This allowed the legend to lurk amongst different communities, countries, and eventually continents at a speed that had never previously been seen before. As is often the case, the Chupacabra began to transform and change shape with this expansion, so it could fit in with different cultural contexts and expectations. It took less than 5 years for the bipedal kangaroo-like creature to become the 4-legged hairless canine it was now known as. This was likely due to a rise in confused sightings of dogs with mange found in regions where the disease was more common, eventually taking over as the most consistent of sightings and explanations. It is also worth noting that amongst many of the locations mentioned, there are frequent and extreme dry seasons. According to the Puerto Rican reports of 1995 and Mexican reports of 1996, it seems that both countries were in the midst of a severe drought. This would result in a change to certain ecological systems, and that could have potentially created a ripple effect, one that led directly to the stories of the Chupacabra. With certain prey animals being scarce in such conditions, many of the local predators would be forced to find food elsewhere, even finding themselves amongst farmers' livestock in their desperation. This is a natural explanation to many of the mysterious killings, and although it's not the most exciting of explanations, it is the most logical. Although this is also not the only factor at play. In Benjamin Radford's book, Tracking the Chupacabra, The Vampire Beast in Fact, Fiction, and Folklore, he highlighted 10 significant reported attacks, 7 of which were recovered and examined. The autopsies concluded that the causes of death were from various animal attacks, displayed by the DNA of several animals found on the carcasses. It is likely that one of the reasons the Chupacabra has so many variations in its description is simply down to how often an animal is mistaken for it. If someone were to have heard the stories of this alien-like creature roaming through the country, and had later caught a glimpse of a strange creature hunting their livestock, it is easy to see how they could merge the two aspects together. As humans, we want to believe we are far more logical than we are. We often mistake what it truly is with what we want it to be, especially if we have preconceived beliefs in certain myths and monsters. This is why it is commonly understood that most sightings of an apparent chupacabra were more than likely sightings of a dog suffering with mange. In fact, every time an alleged chupacabra specimen is caught and given to biologists for examination, they have consistently been identified as known animals, most typically coyotes, dogs, or canine hybrids, more often than not suffering from severe cases of mange. Mange is a skin disease caused by mites, specifically the Sarcoptes scabies mite, which are closely related to the species that cause scabies in humans burrowing through their skin. As they dig their way through the skin of a canine, they often cause extreme itching, leading to the animal excessively scratching at itself. As a result of this, the animal's hair will begin to fall out, leaving behind various wounds and scabbed skin. This, as you can imagine, creates an uncomfortable sight that warps the expected warm, fluffy, and cuddly appearance of a dog. Now, none of this is to be dismissive of the sightings, as a hairless, hungry coyote or dog covered in scabs and tufts of hair would be a strange and confusing sight for many everyday people. Another factor is that mange is quite a debilitating infection and would significantly hinder the lifestyle of a wild dog or coyote, likely making it harder for them to hunt as proficiently as they once could. This would make livestock an easier target for them to go for instead, being kept within the confines of a specific area. Over the years, there have been a number of deliberate attempts to pass off strange-looking animals as a real-life chupacabra. In 2007, a woman in Cuero, Texas, claimed to have found the chupacabra carcass and swiftly had it stuffed and mounted for display, which was shown to the public, complete with merchandise for sale. It drew in a fair bit of local attention, even catching the attention of the press. However, when scientists at Texas State University and UC Davis tested the remains, they found it was simply, once again, a coyote with a severe case of mange. A few years earlier in 2004, another supposed chupacabra was shot and killed on a ranch in Elmendorf, Texas. Dubbed the Elmendorf Beast, its hairless body and strange appearance stirred up plenty of speculation, but tests once again revealed it to be a coyote, also likely suffering from sarcoptic mange. These are solid explanations to explain away most of the four-legged sightings of the chupacabra, but then we have to remember that before the creature was even said to be dog-like in appearance, hundreds of people described it as walking on its hind legs. It seemed to be such a strange and unusual description, one that seemingly appeared out of nowhere. Although some have pointed out that a particular film had been released just as the sightings had begun. It may very well be a coincidence, but if you were to buy a ticket for the 1995 sci-fi horror film Species at the time, you would find significant similarities between the creature character Cell and the original description of the chupacabras. Some also believe that it could have been bats driven by the droughts, or a pack of wild dogs making their way through the island. whilst others suggested it may be due to a sudden spike in the mongoose population. Another theory is that the creature was actually an escaped troop of rhesus monkeys on the island. It sounds ridiculous at first glance, but there were actually said to be a population of rhesus monkeys on the island at the time being used in blood experiments. If one could have gotten loose, it could have been a confusing sight for someone. But that being said, a monkey is difficult to misidentify. On a more biological level is the way in which the animals are killed. Most notably, the seemingly surgical precision in which the Chupacabra's victims appear to be cut open. Although, according to scientists, this also has a natural explanation. When animals die, gases build up in their bodies during decomposition, and on some occasions, this can cause the body to split open along natural seams, creating a perfectly split wound which may seem unnatural and strange to anyone who may come across it. On top of this, there are several insects that feed on the blood of fresh corpses, which can sometimes create the illusion that the animal has been completely drained. And if the body splits open after death, which can happen naturally as gases build up, there won't be any active bleeding. With the heart no longer pumping, the blood settles and clots deep inside the body, making the wounds look oddly clean or bloodless to anyone who stumbles upon them. When the 1995 sightings came around, Puerto Rico was experiencing significant distress from various angles. The large-scale drought the island experienced was heavily affecting its agriculture. But on top of this, hundreds of Puerto Ricans had died from disease, and a devastating hurricane was soon approaching. This combination of natural disasters and social challenges created fertile ground for the emergence of a new mythological entity that, as we often see, could serve as an embodiment of those social anxieties. Political tensions of the time also seemingly played a part in shaping the Chupacabra narrative. Puerto Rico's status as a territory of the United States has been a source of contention for many of the locals for some time now, leading to varying degrees of anti-American sentiment amongst the island. This likely fed into the theory that the Chupacabra was an escaped experiment from a secret US government laboratory, as this gave locals another thing to use as an example of the negative effects the USA had on their shores. While the Chupacabra remains the most widely known blood-sucking cryptid said to be lurking out there, it seems that it's not the only creature of its kind. In the Philippines, for instance, there's a creature known as the sigbin. Descriptions of it vary, but it's often said to resemble a hornless goat or a dog-like beast with large ears, a long tail, and a foul smell. This physical description is notably close to many descriptions of the Chupacabra, but it also carries several similar characteristics with it too. The sigbin is also nocturnal, known to feed on livestock. But curiously, it is also said to feed on their blood, suggesting more connection between the stories than originally thought. Although, the sigbin is said to be a far more dangerous creature, with some variations not only hunting livestock, but also children. In New Orleans, folkloric tales tell of a creature known as the Grunch, a creature said to lurk in the swamps and woods outside the city. Much like the Chupacabra, the Grunch is described as a small, hunched, dog-like or reptilian creature with leathery skin, glowing eyes, and sometimes even spines or bat-like wings, which may be where the occasional winged Chupacabra image comes from. Once again, this creature is said to come out at night, attack livestock, and drain them of blood. There are a few different stories about where the grunch originated, with one version linking it to voodoo, specifically a ritual gone wrong involving the infamous Mary LeVay. Over time, people started reporting strange sounds and sightings along a stretch of road now known as Grunch Road by the locals. Whether it's the Sigbin in the Philippines or the Grunch in New Orleans, there seems to be a reoccurring pattern. Dead livestock, a mysterious nocturnal creature, and communities gripped by fear and uncertainty. The Chupacabra, which may be a newer legend, also seems to be the evolution of other, older urban legends, beginning as a fanciful story before morphing with folkloric tales from nearby cultures. However, its sudden arrival in the 90s was not where the sightings stopped. In 2018, reports began to emerge from the Indian state of Manipur. They spoke of unexplained animal deaths in several villages, particularly in and around the Churachandpur district. Residents discovered poultry and livestock killed during the night, with some carcasses showing puncture-like wounds. The incidents caused concern amongst locals and received coverage in regional media outlets. Some villagers speculated that an unknown animal was responsible, and a few reports even mentioned eyewitness testimony. The story began circulating online, where comparisons were drawn between these events and those of the Chupacabra. In response, the Manipur Forest Department conducted an investigation and concluded that the deaths were caused by feral or stray dogs. Officials stated that the injuries observed on the animals were consistent with canine attacks, particularly those carried out by hungry dogs in packs. The department released its findings publicly, and no evidence was found to suggest the involvement of any unknown or non-native species. On the 21st of May 2022, a security camera at the Amarillo Zoo in Texas captured an unusual figure outside the perimeter fence at around 1:25 a.m. The image, that was taken by a motion-activated trail camera set up to monitor the grounds overnight, was released by the zoo, showing a bipedal, humanoid-looking silhouette with pointed ears or headgear, prompting widespread speculation online. City officials referred to the figure as an unidentified Amarillo object and publicly asked the community to help identify it. The city of Amarillo posted the photo on social media, inviting humorous guesses from the public, but avoided suggesting any official theory as to what it may be. Speculation from the public included suggestions that it could be someone in a costume, a person wearing a large hat, or an animal such as a coyote caught mid-motion. Some, though, have stated that it could be a werewolf, a skinwalker, or a chupacabra. As of now, no definitive identification has ever been made, and the figure has not been seen again. Zoo officials confirmed that there were no signs of attempted entry, no damage to enclosures, and no animals harmed. In 2023, stories began to spread across Bolivia of a strange entity said to be lurking in rural areas. Livestock, such as llamas, alpacas, and cows, had been turning up dead, reportedly without a drop of blood left in their bodies. The wounds looked unusual, and people in the area were quick to connect it to something unnatural, with many pointing out the similarities between this and the times of the Chupacabra. The story gained even more attention when a filmmaker named Carla Flores captured drone footage of a strange figure moving through a field near the town of Oruro. She described it as dog-like, but with a strange hunch on its back, and that footage quickly began circulating online, only adding fuel to the speculation. In response, officials urged people not to panic, acknowledging the fear but actively stressing the importance of proper investigation before pointing fingers at folkloric beings. Although, that being said, no official explanation has yet been found. Beyond its artistic and commercial presence, the Chupacabra has occasionally even served as a symbol in social and political contexts. It was during a 1996 demonstration in Mexico City that a man dressed as a Chupacabra burned paper houses in protest of the government's home financing policies. This worked as a metaphor, with the blood-sucking creature being government exploitation. In fact, over time, the creature had become an anti-hero amongst the locals of Puerto Rico. Being a Commonwealth of the United States means that the locals have to obey federal laws, but have little to no voting power to ever rebuff them, emphasizing that although they're not free of the USA, they are also not quite part of it either. Because of this, the Chupacabra has been adopted as a symbol of how the people of Puerto Rico do not fit in with the rest of the USA. The Chupacabra is now very much a part of our world, whether it truly existed or not. It has been found in film, novels, songs, and stories shared all around the globe. It appeared in an episode of The X-Files in 1997, weaving it into the lore of paranormal investigators Mulder and Scully. It showed up as an animation in the TV movie Scooby-Doo and the Monster of Mexico, cementing its place in pop culture for younger audiences. The Chupacabra has been referenced in songs by Latin American artists, featured in an episode of South Park, and even inspired storylines in several novels. Netflix even released a charming family film about a little boy who befriends the Chupacabra, finding it to be nothing like the scary stories painted it out to be. It has made cameos in shows like Grimm, Lost Tapes, and Supernatural. It has even been turned into plush toys, trading cards, and Halloween costumes over the years. Its name has been used for everything, from roller coasters to craft beers, from wrestling personas to video game enemies. The appeal of the creature can be understood through various social and psychological aspects. Like many of the cryptid narratives, the Chupacabra emerges during times of collective stress and uncertainty. This predator became something the locals could focus on, with a dash of mystery and excitement thrown into the mix, allowing their otherwise scrambled anxieties to be pinpointed at the feet of this strange creature. A new monster that existed as a manifestation of their abstract fears, providing a focus for their collective concerns at a time where so many aspects of life felt so out of control. This is likely a key aspect as to why there is such a fondness for the story even today. It doesn't sit neatly in any one category. It feels folkloric, rooted in oral storytelling, but it also carries several hallmarks of modern science fiction. The descriptions are just believable enough to keep it grounded, but strange enough to leave room for doubt. It fits into a wider pattern of horror too, preying on the helpless, appearing in the dead of night, and leaving no trace but bloodless bodies. Throughout history, we as human beings have used folklore, monsters, and spiritual forces as a way to understand the world. Oftentimes, when we think of that aspect of human nature, we think of our ancestors, a part of our history and psychology that is no longer at play. The Chupacabra and all it has done is a perfect representation that our desire for stories to help us make sense of the world still remains.
Urban Legends is researched, written and produced by Luke Mordew, co-edited by Sophie Tickle, music by Billy Japp, with additional sounds from Storyblocks and Invato. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please like and review our show on your chosen podcast provider. This simple task is a big part of our show's continuation and growth. To access more chapters through our bonus material, early releases, ad-free content, and more, become a patron by clicking the link in our show notes. To follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube, simply search Urban Legends Folklore or visit lukemordew.com/podcast. If you have more information or a correction on anything said, email us on luke@lukemordew.com. We aim to ensure that all information provided is accurate and up to date, and this remains a top priority.